And you ain't black.
And you ain't black. That's what he told me. I can't get enough of that, man. How you fellas doing today?
We here.
We here, man. We are
Yeah.
here. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Guys, we're gonna have a good one tonight. We're gonna have a really good show tonight. We are gonna be breaking down the truth and bringing this to you guys' attention because I think this is a very important issue to discuss because I think it's a lot of the story here that I think a lot of us we weren't taught, and I think these two gentlemen here are going to certainly shed some light on a lot of the missing pieces. Fellas, if you don't mind, Marlon, I know you're pretty familiar to a lot of the people here, but if you guys don't mind just giving a brief little introduction real quick.
I'm me, and nice to meet y'all. I'm me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad to be a guest on your show. He actually hit me up and said, "Hey, I need an old person so I can abuse," and I said, "I'll volunteer tribute." And so here am I to be abused by the young generation, and I'm happy about it. So
appreciate it.
Oh, silly, man. So yeah, my name is Chuck, man. I go by Teaching Chuck on Instagram and YouTube. My boy Neil here just came across me. I think, what was it? A live stream I was doing with Chad Jackson, I believe it was, or something you caught with me, he and I. And you sent me a message, man, and asked me if I would, if I wouldn't mind coming on your show. And I was like, let's do it,
Yes, sir.
I think you guys said you had talked to Chad before. And so I said, man, hey, if it's good enough for Chad, it's good enough for me, man. So I'm here, man, just ready to build with you guys. Watched a couple shows. I actually watched the show you guys did with Chad. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed that show. So yeah, that's why
man. Yeah, Chad was cool. I appreciate the fact that he, we're keeping in touch. So he's a really cool dude, man, and learned a lot in that live stream myself. I had to actually go back and watch it myself. So very, very insightful. So yeah, man, it's a blessing to have you guys here. I'm really, really appreciative of that. So you know what I'm saying?
You're welcome.
So we're gonna get right into this. So guys, you guys saw the thumbnail. Oh, first and foremost, let's do some housekeeping here. Guys, like the video. What are we doing? We got one like here. What are we doing here? Like the video, share it out. You guys already know. Hit the notification bell, subscribe if you have not already. And yeah, we get this party started. Let's acknowledge the chat. Who we got going on here? We got Miss Barbara. How you doing, Miss Barbara? Appreciate you. Queen Via, am I saying that right? How you doing? Miss Deborah says hello, Marlon and Chuck. Hello. Okay, we got straight talk. I'm here too. 2% is back in the house. All right, appreciate y'all. Okay, guys. So tonight's topic, guys, I want to talk about this notion of the black identity fetish. It seems to me, I could be wrong, of course, but it seems like more and more today we see an affinity or a sort of a fetishizing of this notion of blackness. And I'm going to play a few videos because we're going to talk about kind of the roots and the origins of all this. And these guys are going to expound upon it, hopefully, and then I'll chime in if, wherever I see fit. to kind of explain this phenomenon. Because I don't understand it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just play this video here, guys. Marlon, Chuck, let me know if this is it's playing. It's not lagging and nothing like that, because like we said in the back chatter, my internet's not the best here. So all right, we're gonna start with our friend here, Mr. Oh, there he goes. All right, can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
Hewitt.
Right, yeah, Mr. Hewitt.
Man, the myth, the legend.
So yeah, by the way, I put together a little montage of some of our favorite black activists, and so we're just kind of be intermittently opining on some of their views and seeing, getting some fresh perspective on retrospect, kind of looking back and what their ideologies really were trying to convey at the time and how it parallels to today. So here we go, guys. I'm gonna turn this up. Let me know, guys, in the chat. If you're not able to hear it, please just let me know, and I'll turn up the audio. But here we go.
The Black Panther Party is a force for justice in the name of peace. And we realize that we're shedding blood now. We're being killed, that either by the vicious service revolver of the occupying army, which is the police, who's directed by the avaricious businessman, the lying politician, or we're being killed through the lack of medical care, lack of funds because of unemployment. We're being killed because of lack of nutrition. So violence can take many forms.
Ooh, man, that was a lot of reasons to be getting killed. I see. All right, so you guys
he left one very particular one out, though. Oddly enough, he left one very particular one out. Okay.
All right, so we're gonna pull that down, and I'm gonna proceed with the question here. And the question is, well, so one of the kind of groups that and this is what I noticed, but one of the kind of groups that usually emerges when an oppressed people come into freedom is some group that will take their identity. I noticed that identity, and that same identity that was once used against them in the case of blackness, tries to seek power through that identity. So in you guys, both of you guys' opinion, do you think that's what we saw in the 60s with the emergence of the Black Panther Party? And Chuck, we can start with you.
Okay. Yes, that is absolutely what we saw, and playing on race, of course, was the purpose. Because what we saw in the 1960s, for those of you who don't know, was the rise of what became known as, and cut me off at any time, guys, if I'm kind of getting off the path a little bit, but I'm just going to dive right in. What we saw in the 1960s was the beginning of what historians or people who are familiar with the political goings on of the time as the rise of the new left. This was the rise of the new left in the 1960s. And the reason why it was called the new left is because this is when that baby boomer generation, who were known as red diaper babies, were coming of age. They were young teenagers, early 20s, going off into college, right around that time. And the reason why it was called the new left was because at this time, we were about a decade and a half or so past World War II. The Korean War had ended. The Vietnam War would be starting pretty soon. But what happened was that the red diaper babies, and the red diaper babies, for those of you who don't know who red diaper babies are, these were the children of the folk who were considered a part of the Great Generation, right? The Great Generation of World War II.
Okay.
and you had a lot of newly arrived immigrants coming from various parts of Europe, right? A lot of them, Jewish and some other, sort of minority groups, right? Who would they weren't considered on par with say like Anglican Protestants, for example. Okay, but just to cut to the chase, they brought the philosophy of communism across the Atlantic and settled into these various urban ghettos all across the northeastern seaboard, particularly places like New York, right? And so they taught the philosophy of or the ideology of communism to their children. Their children were reared, right, and raised by communists, and these are the people who were, of course, known as red diaper babies, right? And so once the 60s came about, you see, because everyone had these starry-eyed visions of what life was like behind the Iron Curtain, right? So everybody, because the Soviet Union was the destination. But after the death of Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev would rise to power in Soviet Russia, and he would release a document known as the Khrushchev Report. And the Khrushchev Report put went into detail about the horrors that were committed in Soviet Russia under the rubric in the auspice of Joseph Stalin's rulership. And so the New Left, instead of just completely giving up on the dream of communism, they changed the way they approached Marxist philosophy. And a lot of people at the time, particularly, this is when we saw the rise of what they call second wave feminism, Black liberation. We saw, various Chicano movements that were Marxist in nature. This is when you saw this coalition of these disparate groups cobble themselves together in this massive revolutionary effort to bring down the West. And
damn.
And I'll just pass it over because I don't want to,
Okay.
Sure.
Appreciate that, Chuck. Appreciate that. Mr. Marlon,
summing it up.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Mr. Marlon, go ahead. Do I need to repeat the question? Or you good?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the kind of groups that usually emerge when an oppressed people come into freedom is some group that takes their identity, the identity that was once used against them, in this case, blackness, and they try to seek power through that identity. Is that what we saw, in your opinion, happening in the 60s with the emergence of the Black Panther Party?
I don't think it was a theft of identity. I think it was a creation of one. The black race didn't have an identity during slavery. They had zero identity. Their identity was whatever their labor was. There wasn't we black and this is how we behave. That's a recent thing. They did what had to be done on a plantation to live. They held on to whatever spirituality they had, created maybe a little bit more mixing with what they were introduced to, but they didn't have a culture. Anyone who says that Black America or blacks anywhere that were in slavery outside of the continent of Africa that said they had a culture, they lie. Once you left that, you took whatever you had in your servitude and mix it with what you encountered once you left, and that became your new culture.
So acculturation, pretty much.
Yeah. So you pretty much had to adapt, and then it became something. So the people that came out of it, they encountered those that were so-called freedom fighters, people who were looking to try and aggregate them into the current culture at the time. And because they didn't know any better, they adopted whatever was handed to them at the time. So a culture was kind of given to African Americans, since we're talking about the ones here. African Americans were never given or had their own stepping out. They were offered one, and it became what we now know as Black culture. And even then, that's why it's so varied from each state to each state, because not every plantation ended up the same, and not every location had the same culture around them. You look at people like look at New Orleans, for instance. Okay, why is it that the African Americans in New Orleans are so drastically different in history and everything, and how their culture behaves, than someone say on, in New York or California? Because once they came out of what they came out of, they adapted to whatever was around, mixed what they knew, and it became this. Um, Now, with the advent of what was going on the social and political side with both communism and the right wing, um, each tried to use, obviously, the newly found freedom of the Black man to their advantage, as with anybody. The communists saw their plight as the way to get in, and the right wing saw their freedom as the way to get in. But both saw them as an opportunity to be assimilated into their cause. I'm not quite sure that today it's any different. Left and right still try and use the Black culture as the tug rope, and we are kind of like the middle marker of that tug rope, and whichever side gets the strongest pull gets them to fall and follow them. I think the majority of time that has passed has kind of brought to the mind of the African Americans here a sense of we need to have something given back to us. And I think that has been the prevailing thought, because just like we know, the left has taken over a lot more of what's in front of us. So whereas the people on the right have to more push, really have to push to get in front, the left don't have to work that hard. It's everywhere. And because they have always tried since, in the 1800s, tried to push the communistic movement is not something new, as we know, it's not new, but it's become a whole lot more available. And with people being more lazy, it has become more palpable for more people to gravitate to, the young. You mentioned the baby boomers, and I think Generation X kind of was a stopgap. I think that was the first generation that really saw for themselves a way to not identify with the past and forge a new future. And then after that, what they did a poor job of, though, was handing that same mindset off to their kids. I'm guilty of that. And so what you end up with is the millennials. And they are more prone to be just as distracted as the boomers and weaker. So you have a very toxic mix now of a weak mind and an eager mind to not do anything. So you have communism has a petri dish, a field day now, because they can really thrive in this environment, because I can hand somebody a piece of information and they will never look it up. They don't have to. They'll take my word for it, and if it identifies with their plight, I have them.
I want to get Chad in here. Excuse me, not Chad. Forgive me. Chad. I want to get Chuck in here. Chuck, you had your hand raised. Did you want to kind of interject there? On some of his points.
Marlon was saying a lot of good things, pointing out a lot of key points there. And the reason why I talked about the baby boomers in particular is because you brought up the 1960s and you brought up the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party was, of course, seen as the tip of the spear when it came to the new left, because the Black Panther Party epitomized the best of what the left could be in the United States. Because once again, after everyone found out about the gulags and the forced labor camps and the exterminations and everything that was going on in the Soviet Union, like I say, a lot of people were thinking about abandoning the movement, but the Black Panther Party would come along to or to make an attempt to reinvigorate that revolutionary spirit. And so that's why the Black Panther Party was at the tip of the spear. Marlon said something when he talked about, because I was writing some things down as he was speaking. He was talking about the left wing and the right wing, and talking about, how both sides have tried to assimilate, but I don't know what his exact words were, but assimilate them into their cause. And here's what I say when I hear something like that. When I hear Marlon say that, I mean, it reminds me of what was it, that old Bob Dylan song. I was speaking of Chad, I heard Chad mention this recently. He talked about that old Bob Dylan song about, you know, everyone has to serve someone, everyone has to serve a master. And as human beings existing in a finite world, right, we have to assimilate into something, or else there is no stability, because every society has to have values. The question becomes, what is it that we value, right? And so when you start talking about identity, we're talking about Black identity, and I don't mean to kind of go off the deep end and start getting too heavy too fast, but of course, man's identity, male, female, of course, was given to us by our creator. All other forms of identity or consciousness are in fact examples of false consciousness, not in a Marxian sense, but in a biblical sense. But of course, to Marx, the proletariat, of course, had to bolster or facilitate, right, a class consciousness so that they could be the force that in fact drove history to its conclusion, because Marx believed that he had history down to a science, what he called his historicism, right? And so when we start talking about Black identity, this Black identity, and I'm sure Marlon knows this, and Neil, is funny because, you know, the name of your show is titled TheRealUnwoke. And that's what it means to be woke, right? To have a political, and I know you know this, and I see that's why you picked the title, right? Because when Marx talked about awakening a class consciousness, that is in fact where we derive the very notion and the concept of the term woke, right?
There you go. There you go.
So when the reason why I mentioned the New Left, and I didn't get into a lot of detail because I wanted Marlon to chime in, but what the left did is they took what they themselves referred to as vulgar Marxism or classical Marxism, and they came up with different new identity markers, right, in order to create or to continue to perpetuate the Marxian-based power dynamics, of course, between oppressed and oppressor. So the Black race here in the United States, speaking of assimilation, are not to assimilate into the wider culture, because they, as the labor force in a sense, not labor in a traditional Marxian sense, but we are the labor force in that we are the class of the unprivileged. Okay. And so we have to always hearken on that, because it is our job to, right, be the harbingers of a better tomorrow, of this revolution. So that's why the Black identity is key. Because remember, when you start talking about, and I'm gonna pass it back to you in a second, Marlon, or pass it to Neil, because you have to remember, in order to really understand, and a lot of people, since, you know, like a lot of people are talking about politics now and this and that and the third, and terms like communism and Marxism are on the tips of a lot of folks' tongues nowadays. Even people, like I said, who've never heard the term before are wondering what's going on. And they may not understand exactly how, you know, Marxism functions, and you know, and understand the fundamental sort of the way it's methodology, right? Fundamentally is what I'm trying to say. But in order to really understand Marxism, you have to ask yourself a question, because Marxism hinges on the belief that there is something that is owned. In Marx, in Karl Marx, in his writings, all things came down to property. And of course, he borrowed the very concept of property, the existence of property, which leads to inequality, from a much older philosopher that gave birth to the French Revolution by the name of Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Yep.
Because property is what leads to inequality. But there are different types of property. What am I saying? For Marx, capital was the key, right? And capitalism is the ideology that justifies its existence, right? And so fast forward, when you hear people talking about white supremacy and white privilege and all of this nonsense, I don't know if you are familiar with I think it was an 89-page essay written by a woman named I'll have her name in a second, but she wrote an essay entitled "Whiteness as Property." And you'll hear a lot of these race baiting professors talk about, they don't talk about white people, they talk about whiteness, because racial privilege is the thing in this instance that is in fact owned. And the ideology is not capitalism. The ideology that justifies white privilege is, of course, white supremacy. So we are outside of the loop because we don't have access to the property, right? And in this instance, that property is, of course, whiteness. So our purpose as Black people is to act in a way that, of course, delegitimizes the very concept, because whiteness as a concept is, what lays the groundwork for the existence of inequality. So we have to continue to we must not assimilate into the ways of the wider culture, because it is our job to topple the system.
Yep. Disassociation.
With our degeneracy.
Yeah.
And see, the question then becomes, well, how do we define or determine what's degenerate and what's pathological? We don't get to define that, because he who gets to define truth is he who has power. So when people start talking about, man, we don't, Black people, who's to say what's this and what's that and this, that, and the third? Well, the people who have power set up the rule, and this is the Marxian meta narrative. Those who have power set up the rules, right? I.e., capitalism and white supremacy. They set up the rules so that it will benefit them and keep us on the outs looking in, so that we merely exist only to increase their power, wealth, and influence.
Prediction. Wow, man.
I'm
Guys,
explaining all this, and it's all nonsense. But I'm just, explaining it just to get to understand, to know exactly how these people think, and where the very concept of Black identity came from. Yeah. Those who want it, and you guys got a lot of this when you spoke to Chad. There are people with a vested interest in making sure that Black people remain dysfunctional. And I'm gonna tell you, the people who have a vested interest in making sure that Black people remain dysfunctional do not share your complexion, right? Because, of course, the new left, which gave rise to the Black identity, Black power, Pan-Africanism, and all this trash, was, of course, created. All
right, guys, like the video. We dropping the meat and potatoes. We are dropping the meat and potatoes, guys. Like the video.
I'm sorry, y'all.
No, man. That was well received. Marlon, did you have any last thoughts on that? Or I'm gonna move on to the next question. If you had anything you wanted to chime in.
No, go ahead.
Okay, cool, sweet.
I think whatever I have, I think I can apply for the rest of it. So go ahead.
Okay, got you. All right, guys, we're gonna move on to another one of our professional race hustlers. I got them all. And no one's getting away. All right, here we go. Hold up. Oops.
Okay.
No. I actually didn't.
White America.
I actually didn't incorporate.
Didn't you have Angela Davis up there?
Yeah, I did. I'm gonna get to her. I got it all kind of structured, but okay. Right now we on your boy Stokely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, here we go. Let me run it back just a couple seconds. Guys, like the video. We're dropping them gems tonight. All right, here we go.
White America, the total community, is incapable of condemning herself for the acts of brutality and bestiality that she has heaped upon the total Black community. She cannot do it. If she did, she would have to commit suicide. That may not be such a bad idea.
Oh, damn, that's deep. All right. So Marlon, I'm gonna pitch this one to you. does does white guilt equal black power? Does white guilt equal black power? Pull this video down.
It can't do either because it's not a mathematical equation that makes any sense. It's like asking does bananas plus tacos equal shoes? It doesn't make any computable sense. Um, but they like to make it sound like it's good because what they try to do is work on the emotional aspect of things, and they try to herald back to a painful time. And you see the psychologists do all the time. If it's a painful time, you use the painful time to make a breakthrough in something that you're dealing with. So with Black America, you use the painful time. And if it was a painful time, then everyone who looked like the person that put you through, it must mean that everyone was responsible for your pain. So anyone that looks like that person, bam. Um, the whole theory hinges on one very important aspect. And Nietzsche talked about this quite often, where he talked about the aspect of nihilism. Okay. Because nothing really matters, the only thing you have to hinge your bets on is what you have. Hence, Marxism harks on what you can have or not have. And your worth is not in you, it's in your having of stuff. And since they can put the idea in someone's head that people of a certain complexion have more than you, it must mean that their worth is also hand in hand with it. So when they try to break it down to white fragility to give black people power, they don't realize they're contradicting themselves. Here's how they're contradicting themselves. There is no way for a black person to have white skin. Zero way. So my having of something could never take place. So even with white fragility, there is zero way for blacks to have any sort of power because of white fragility. They will have to all become Rachel Dolezal in order for blacks to have some sort of power based on their whole idea of nihilism. If I can't have something, period, there's no way for me to be white, then that whole power structure goes completely out the window and your whole theory falls to crap. But because they're harking on something painful, you're not going to look at the logic of it. You're going to look
Yep.
at the fact that it hurt. And if it hurt, then I have to be angry. And angry is something I have.
Yeah.
And if I can make the other
Sensationalism.
person have sadness, oh, I can let go of my sadness. Now I have a power over them. And they switch the power from something that's tangible to something emotional, not realizing now they're dabbling in something that they said never existed. But the largest scope of it is this, right? So if I have in my mind a attempt to try and bring people to the light, this is the left, the light, and to wake you up. If my only effort to wake you up is to put somebody else down to make them feel less than me, instead of building me up to not focus on what they have but what I have, it should raise a red flag. It doesn't raise a red flag. In effect, what it actually does is give you more power to think that I can rise from pain and use my pain to inflict it on them because of the years of pain that they put on me. And that is my power. But in reality, what you're actually doing is only perpetuating the pain that you think you're trying to get rid of. Because what you're going to end up having is a cycle, like we see now in the portion of black community that seem to cannot make it. What you end up with is a cycle that you can't break free of. Because in order to get ahead, you have to think of the pain. To think of the pain, you have to think of what you don't have. And in order to have that, you have to make sure you don't have it. Because you can't have it once you because once you have it
Wow.
now, you've left the plantation of the pain. But
Mm.
if you don't have that pain, then how are you going to get the power dynamic to switch? So the Marxists have done a fantastic job of keeping the mindset weak, keeping you in the idea that you can't have it, but you need it. And it's always that dangling carrot in front of your horse, but you never win the race. You're always in
Tantalizing.
last.
Yep.
Yeah, you're always in last place. But you're thinking you're not looking at the finish line. You're looking at the carrot, and they've made you believe that the carrot is the end goal. Meanwhile, you see other horses just running without a carrot because they see the bigger picture down the line of the end zone. They're ready to run to it. But if I can keep you thinking in your mind that perpetual heartache and subservitude to people is the way to go, I can keep you in my cycle of you having nothing, wanting everything, thinking you'll get it, you never have it, and you keep coming back to me for the reassurance that you'll one day get what you want, and you'll never get it. It's a pretty crazy cycle.
Yeah, vicious cycle. If that, Chuck, does white guilt equal black power? Aside from the mathematical aspects of it all.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, it doesn't serve blacks. It doesn't serve whites. You know, everything that Marlon said. I mean, I second that. You know, he talked about Nietzsche. Honestly, sometimes I can say Nietzsche, or sometimes I say Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, right?
I remember that line in Coming to America. I remember when, anyway. Remember that is Nietzsche. That is not me.
That is Nietzsche. That's not me. That's too funny.
One cannot fly into flying. No, but what Marlon essentially broke down, like I say, he used Nietzsche. I'm gonna call him Nietzsche for short. How's that? I thought about Marx and his concept of dialectical materialism, when Marx talks about the only way knowledge can be gained, right, is through the senses. So of course it is it is material conditions that creates the knowledge of man. But I'm just going to add put a different spin on it, because everything Marlon said was so on point. But when I think about this whole white guilt nonsense, to me, that is a false quest for the divine. And what I mean by that is that human beings, they can deny it until they're blue in the face. It doesn't matter. But the heart is wicked. And every man, whether he acknowledges it, it is of no consequence. Because what you have when you talk about, you know, white guilt and all this other crap, it's just like, class guilt. We talk about the what happened to the kulaks in Ukraine during the Holodomor. There are a lot of different examples, right, of this. You know, we saw it in the cultural revolution, right? You know, and Mao talked about how, you know, China needed to be brought to its knees culturally, because, well, the reason why the Great Leap Forward failed is because that China was too bourgeois, right? And so, you know, this white guilt, they have to be, flogged and dragged and made to sort of worship at the altar of the black body and all this other garbage, right? But repentance, see, I can't grant you that, right? So you can feel guilty, but for what exactly? And who exactly are you going to for your redemption? Because all human beings, we know we're fallen. We know that we are in fact flawed. So when you substitute a legitimate monotheistic, and I'm just coming at you from my perspective, of course, when you substitute a legitimate monotheistic worldview for the secular, i.e., for the social, for the political, etc., this is what you have. Concepts like white guilt, because everyone wants to feel like they're serving something, serving the cause of what? Racial reconciliation, social justice, righting the wrongs of the past, and everything else. It's all nonsense, because they're all, some white folks, whether if they watching, if they listening, there are some white people that's going to come across this and watch this. Redemption is something that I, Marlon, and Neil cannot give you. So your guilt means nothing to me, because all of the oppression and all the crap you want to bring up from the past, it cannot be repaid, but it can be overcome. And it's not going to be overcome by way of your guilt trip, because we are countrymen now. And if you are weak, it makes me weak, particularly when you are the majority. And of course, that is the point. It's, of course, to weaken the majority, make them self-loathe to the point where our society can be radically transformed, to quote Barack Obama. I'm gonna pass it back.
The fallen Messiah. All right, cool. Appreciate that, guys. So we're gonna move on to Miss the lovely Angela Davis here. Let me go ahead and cue this up. All right, here we go.
Of committing a contrived, engaging in a contrived effort on the part of those who make the decisions of eliminating Black people. Is this a form of suppression also? To make sure, in other words, that Black people are railroaded into prisons, into jail?
So what's in the whole history of the United States, the impact of racism has been to attempt to contain Black people, has been to attempt to stifle the desires towards liberation. One of the ways in which this is accomplished is by trying to convince Black people that they're completely powerless before this huge apparatus, and that the police can just come into the community and pick someone out, kill them, as they have done on many occasions in the past, charge them with something they didn't do, railroad them to prison, send them to the gas chamber. This is just one of the many ways that the system, and it's not a contrived effort in the sense that it's done consciously by a few men up at the top. It's built into the system. It's built into it's built into the nature of this society. And getting back to the question of what a revolutionary is, Black revolutionary realizes that we cannot begin to combat racism. We cannot begin to effectively destroy racism until we've destroyed the whole system.
Good gosh, man.
Or hear me out. Ooh. Leave and go start your own dang system somewhere else. Like, I don't look. Every time I hear these people talk, I hear the same people coming out their mouths. I hear Louis Farrakhan, and they all talk the same sing song. Like
but
they're trying
revered,
to sell me on a
Marlon.
circus act or something. They're trying to sell me on a circus act. Introducing the amazing swinging monkey from the tree. Like, that's not going to sell me on something. But if you want to have a different system, and the system is really that bad, and it's built against you, here's an idea. Build up your stuff together, get all your finances, and bounce. Like, it's like simple. I am sure with all the Marxists that are around America right now, you can purchase a little island somewhere.
Oh yeah,
you know, nice warm little island for like, I don't know.
They can live out their utopian fantasy.
Man, build
it's
your
been
stuff,
tried.
Hang it out, man. Go do that. Just don't ask us for nothing.
Whoa. What do you mean it's been tried, Chuck?
Perhaps y'all haven't heard the name Jim Jones. You start talking about.
Except he didn't buy the island. Nobody.
He didn't buy the island,
them to leave. Yeah, he persuaded them to go with him, but. You know, like, I don't think they'll get away with it the second time. I mean, it's like trying to say, Black people, get on this boat. Nah, fam, not a second time. You already got me once with that. Not twice.
But y'all know why I brought up Jim Jones, and that's why y'all start laughing, because people, the people, and it's crazy because a lot of people say Jim Jones, they probably think the rapper. Right. Jim Jones, of course, was a real guy, but many people don't know who Jim Jones.
He made the Red Solo Cup official,
right? But he made it official, right? But
cult leader.
But Jim Jones, of course, was like many Black pastors. He preached the social justice gospel because Jim Jones, of course, was a communist. And speaking of Angela Davis, he and Angela Davis were fond of one another. They were
check that out.
So much so to the point you can go look this up, that Angela Davis frequently wrote Jim Jones letters in support of his cause. Jim Jones was one of the first. I don't mean to get into it, so I'll just mention that because we know about the drinking of the Kool-Aid, the whole saying when people say drink the Kool-Aid, think of Jim Jones, to the extent that they even know who Jim Jones is, right? It wasn't a mass suicide, it was a mass execution. But his trip to Guyana was, of course, his feeble-minded attempt to create a socialist utopia. All right, because he thought that nuclear war would break out eventually, and that the United States would be destroyed by his Soviet comrades, and he wanted to set up a safe haven for he and his followers. But it was hell on earth.
Well, it's no accident.
Period.
My bad.
It's no accident. It's no accident that he picked Guyana, by the way, either. If you have any idea of what took place in Guyana when Bush wasn't there, just look back at that and see what exactly took place, right? I have no doubt that he was working in some way, shape, and form in hand with governmental agencies to promote this concept of stuff. So it's all it's all fanfare, but this concept that they keep pushing, that, and this is the third time I've heard, in the pieces of video that you put out there, that somehow random executions of the Negro is taking place throughout America since the 50s, 40s, 30s. That random executions have happened to the point where it became part of the system. I'm not saying, again, people out there who are, pro-black, I'm not saying that there are misbehaving and miscreants in the justice system. I'm not saying there aren't. There are tons of them. But to tell me that it's systematic, where it's part and parcel of the thing that we live under, here's why I can't buy it. This is why. And I've tested this theory because people told me, I bet you won't do that here. And I went and I bet them. I did it. So one time I was in Mississippi. Now, everybody know what Mississippi. Everybody knows Mississippi. And we're talking about 1996, 97, 98 Mississippi. Okay. It was told to me, you can't move to Mississippi as a mixed couple. That's how bad they thought Mississippi was. So I was in Mississippi once, and I got pulled over by a white Mississippi cop. And in my head, I thought, oh, I'm going to see exactly what all this stuff is about. It didn't happen. You know why? Because I actually did break the speed limit, and all I did was, sorry, give me my ticket, and I was gone. Oddly enough, I wasn't in a black neighborhood. I was the black guy in the white neighborhood, which should have exponentially put me in danger. So when I hear them talk about this kind of stuff, and they don't mention the stuff we do to each other, it doesn't lend credence to the argument that we care about what's happening to us. It matters to them who's doing it. It's okay if I hurt my own family, but you better not let somebody from the outside come hurt my family, because that's when I'll really lose my temper. Meanwhile, I'm beating the mess out of my mom. I have my dad at gunpoint, but someone comes in and slashes my sister, and all of a sudden I become, family protector number one. I cannot believe your cause is just or good if you don't apply it strategically across the board for all situations oppressing me. And I see that constantly, where they don't really care about what's oppressing me. They care about what they care that's oppressing me. And then I have to care that they care about that thing. And if I don't care, then I'm a sellout that I don't care the way they care. And if they can push that strong, which they have, they've won. They have won pushing that. The combat now between people like us that don't buy into it is we have to be strong enough to not care how they view us for not viewing it like them.
Can I go ahead, Marlon?
No, go ahead.
Done, Marlon? You done? Sure?
Yeah,
sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
Wow, when I listening to Angela Davis, I go back moments ago when I said that she talked about all these problems black folks were afflicted with, all this stuff, and so she's talking about, like Marlon said, the system is the problem, right? Goes back to what I said, right? We are being used to destroy the entire system, because the creation of the black identity, to get back to the core theme of the show, was of course a creation of Marxist ideologues that fled to the United States during the rise of Hitler. And to get back, and so their goal, and I'm gonna tie it in. Give me a second. Their goal, right, is to overthrow capitalism, i.e., the belief in the free market, with that planned economy, because that's what Angela Davis is talking about when she says the system. The system is the free market enterprise. And that's what it always comes back to, because that is, in fact, what they blame for everything. Every manner of oppression can be blamed on the free market system. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is go and read the literature of the past and the literature of today from the people who still support the international socialist movement. Everything from racism, transphobia, homophobia, able-bodied privilege, all this nonsense can all be traced, of course, back to capitalism. Now, there are only two ways. I said this in a recent upload on my YouTube channel when I broke down the philosophical roots of fascism. There's only two ways you can organize a society. You can plan it from the top down, or you can have a market system that is, where the people set the prices of goods and services, right, based upon the principle of supply and demand, and allow the people to sort themselves out as they see fit. Or you can have, right, an institution or mechanism such as the state, which has a monopoly on the usage of force that can compel human behavior. And that's what Angela Davis is talking about, because the system that she's talking about is capitalism, but there's only one alternative. Yep. And that's a planned economy, i.e. a socialist economy, which is why the Black Panthers and Angela Davis and Kwame Ture, aka Stokely Carmichael, all of these men and women are socialists. And once again, they sat, to the core. And once again, they sat at the feet of German Marxists who were not, in fact, Black. And the only reason why I point that out, gentlemen, and I think you all know why I point that out, is because a lot of people, once again, think that these concepts are just these grassroots organic things that just sprung up out of nowhere. But of course, these were concepts and ideas that were disseminated. They made their way into the ghetto, to quote Herbert Marcuse, that we need to galvanize the ghetto people, because that's where the energy was. Take the gangs, take the low lives, take the criminals, right, and turn them into revolutionaries for our cause. Every revolutionary demagogue has done this, from Fidel Castro all the way back to Vladimir Lenin. And that's what the Black Panthers were. But all these ideas, of course, came out of the university.
All right. Well, all right. Well, that brings me to my next question here. Hold up, make sure I got it. Did have a couple more videos, but I think for the sake of time, I'll just kind of shortcut those and move here. So here we go. So, Chuck, I'm gonna pitch this one to you. So, is the Black identity a form of secular idolatry?
Yes, I believe that it is a form of secular idolatry. Because, I mean, first of all, the first step towards a wisdom, right, or the first virtue, of course, is humility, right? There can be no wisdom without humility, right? Because of, wisdom begins with the fear of God, and in order to have the wherewithal to acknowledge God, man must of course humble himself. And that goes right into the entire allegory of the story of Adam and Eve, right? It was man in his ego, his pride, and his hubris tried to usurp the authority of his own creator. Yep. And I say all that because, so many people, I mean, you hear it all the time when you talking about, this melanin nonsense, all this black girl magic. I'm sorry, I'm not pulling punches.
Get them.
I know I'm new to your audience. I hope I don't run off half your audience, Neil.
Get them, Chuck. Teach them, Chuck.
All this, it's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. And of course, your race, once again, to go back, that you must constantly beat that drum about being Black, and Black is pride. I'm Black and I'm proud, and this and that, and Afrocentricity and all this stuff. You have to constantly bang that drum. Right. Because to lose sight of that is, of course, because see, it isn't enough for you to say, you know what, right? Because if you're worshiping if you're not worshiping the God or the one true God, then of course you are engaging in idolatry. And so if you're doing that, the left would suggest that you are, of course, you've become resigned to your fate, right? You're being too fatalistic and you're just going to fall back. Mm-hmm. And to be neutral is to be a co-conspirator, because you are simply participating in something that is inherently unjust because it produces conditions that are not equitable for all. And so you have to constantly hearken on race because you are a part of that push that's going to take down the system, as Angela Davis calls it, because you cannot have a belief in the one true God because there is no change in that. Because what you have internalized is the belief that the only thing that can save man from his suffering, because we all suffer, because right, life is a burden on us all, and the only thing that can rescue us from that is a supernatural intervention beyond the faculties of man. And so to believe that to them is an example of false consciousness. So you must always put your race before your Lord and Savior.
That is crazy. All right, Marlon, is is the Black identity a form of secular idolatry?
No, because you can't have idolatry in the secular world.
Oh, great point.
Good point.
I see what you did. I see what you did there.
I know. I got it.
I see what you did there.
Secular idolatry in that world would be us. If we were in their system and we held God, that would be idolatry to them. But what they do is doing what they're doing regular worship. That's they're holding honor and reverence to the person that they are following, which is themselves. They are their own gods, and that's genuine worship. They genuinely believe what they're doing. I do agree that the nature of man is to hold on to something that he thinks he can control. And that's with everybody, even people who say they believe in God. We still want to defy him by saying we control what we get to do. He's going to give me a task, but I control how. Jonah tried that, and we saw how that worked out. But for some reason, today we can't watch it and realize it don't work when you do that. Just stop. We slow learners, right? Very slow learners. I remember a picture of a monkey, and the monkey had a bandaged up arm. It was missing from mid arm. It was just wrapped up. And in his other hand, he was holding out a firecracker, piece of dynamite thing, and his head's turned this way. And the t-shirt read slow learner. I think that is a lot of society today. You just got your arm blown off by something stupid. And you figure maybe if I change arms, it won't happen the second time. Not quite sure how they get to that logic, but that's where we are today. So for it to say, to me to say it's a form of secular idolatry. No, but it is a form of idol worship because we know that the alternative is the true way, which is worshiping God. There is no real way around it, though, because in order for people to get to that point of acknowledging God, they have to unacknowledge themselves, the leader. And because they don't see any hope outside of ironically, they're putting themselves in the system to fight the system while upholding the system. That's really what they're doing.
Right.
Right. And they don't really see it that way because what they think is happening is some grandiose movement of truth. And you mentioned that same, that their whole idea of truth is. But they don't really have any clue what truth is. In their mind, truth is a feeling. It is not something that is provable. It is something that I can shout over you. And if I can shout it at you enough, you will eventually give in and realize that I'm right. That is truth. Hence why during protests they scream a lot. They have no desire to change in dialogue. They want to just scream it over you because eventually they realize that the senses will give up. And once the senses give up, they project it as a win. And if they project that as a win, that bolsters their cause. But it's not far-fetched from what demons do. Sorry to tell you guys are demons. If anyone has ever had any encounters with spiritual entities, you realize in your head, hence schizophrenia, everyone hears screaming voices in their head. There's a reason for that. The devil tries to overpower your senses with something that you cannot handle to the point where you think you have to just give in. And you've heard people that commit suicide say, I had to give in to the voices. I listened to them because it became too much. You've heard that before. It just became too much. It is a spiritual battle we're in because the demons do that all day long. Hence why every single protest that you see these people have, it's the exact same MO. They all scream at the top of their lungs at you until you give in.
Yep.
The demons are no different. And again, this is why I say it's not idol worship. They're doing exactly what they were meant to do, which is worshiping their God. In our books, it's idolatry because we know the true God. But I can't call it secular idolatry because if you put that word in front of it, it's automatically idolatry towards God. There is no way around it because no one is willing to turn and they're not willing to give up their wants and their wishes for God's wishes because they don't think any power resides there. Holding on to something that's tangible, this is easier than holding on to something less tangible, which is spirit. Even though they're hoping for change of heart, which is a spiritual thing, and not a change of color. They're not asking for people to just change color. They're asking for a heart change. And that's never going to happen because they're not even focused on the heart. They're focused on this. And even when you do try as a white person to change this, that's too much. You're racist. And so, and when you're white and black and try to go the other way, oh, that's even worse. You're a sellout. So there's no winning. There's no winning with them. Yeah,
that's the Kafka trap. Yeah.
Real quick, Neil, before you go into your next question.
No, you're good. You're good.
Just remember something, and it was Cheryl Harris, by the way, was the one who wrote the essay on
Okay, yeah.
Cheryl Harris.
I was trying to think of it too myself because I knew what you were talking about. Go ahead.
Marlon said something when he talked about the system and how Huey when he was, or was it no, it was Angela Davis when she was saying about black people, taking us off the gas chambers and all this stuff, and he was saying, about when we kill each other, it's like everybody, they get blind, they're dumb, deaf, and blind, they don't see anything, right? And I just wanted to just elaborate on that because the excuse that they give, right, is that whatever sort of dysfunction, or black on black crime, whatever, they hate when they hate when people use that term, right? They say, well, that only exists as a product, of course, of our oppression. And so the point, of course, is to fix the system, therefore you can fix man. And so you have two, it's a dichotomy, right? You have two opposing worldviews. One suggests, like Rousseau did, that, and I quote Rousseau, that man is born free, but is everywhere in chains. You either believe man is born good, or you believe, as the Bible believes, that man is born wicked and needs salvation, right? And so if you believe that man is born holy, then like the liberation theologians, the heretics that they are, they believe that you fix the institutions, you can alleviate sin. But they run into a grave problem because you cannot get to, mind you, you cannot get to the original individual that tipped the first domino. You can't do that unless you're talking about Adam and Eve. And that's something that they won't do. Because if we are just, with slavery, it's this, it's that, it's just like, oh, okay. Well, then, sort of like what Mark said, well, if capitalism, like a lot of them suggest, is simply exploitation and theft, then the people who do own rights to the means of production, who in fact did they take it from? Well, they took it from the exploited worker. Well, who did the exploited worker take it from before they had it so that it can be taken away from them? And so it just goes back and back and back, and you run into the infinite regression fallacy, and you don't even know where the beginning is. Because it's all nonsense. And that's why they excuse away a lot of bad Black behavior. It's never their fault, because they're simply reacting to something that was done to them first. The trauma or this.
Isn't that like kids? Isn't that like kids?
It
He hit me first. He hit me first.
Yeah, just shirk the blame.
That's why we got to be like parents sometimes. Just put both of them in timeout. Just put both of y'all, whoop both of y'all behinds and put both of y'all in timeout. Take all your gifts, take all your toys, take your clothes, put you outside, something. But both of y'all need to be in timeout. There is no cure for this nonsense. There's no cure for this ridiculousness, man. I'm telling you, these people, they don't want an actual change.
Nah.
Let's just be honest. None of them want things to move forward. They want it to remain this way in order for them to have a plight. Because outside of that, they got nothing.
You gotta have. And they know they got nothing. You gotta have something to struggle against. You gotta have something to fight against. It gives them this sense of purpose.
Facts.
Okay, fellas. We're down to the last question here. And Chuck, you can pick up this. You can pick it up.
Okay.
So the last question for the night. All things considered, what we discussed tonight. As a viable means going forward, should Black Americans continue to hold on to this illusion of group identity as a viable means forward?
No, not at all. I mean, what we must embrace, of course, is individualism. And when I say individualism, I'm not talking about being selfish. That's not what I mean. Even if you're talking about groups, right, you're still talking about a collection of individuals. So the question then becomes, what defines the group, right? Because racial solidarity for its own sake cannot be the supreme virtue, right? It can't be that, right? Because what does that mean anyway? It doesn't mean anything. And so, I mean, it reminds me of like these phony Pan-Africanists, for example, right? The
Marcus
Mark
Garvey
Johnsons of the world, and even Marcus Garvey. I've taken Marcus Garvey to tell. I don't lionize or romanticize anyone who we are told, we were made to believe were these great men that did such great things, right? Like Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois, or Dubois, if you like the French pronunciation. He was
Martin Luther King.
Yeah, huge. Right, Martin Luther King, but I brought up Du Bois because he was huge in the creation of Pan-Africanism.
Hell yeah.
Other men I was thinking about, the man who was a guy who invented Kwanzaa, Malana Karanga, the man who was convicted in 1971 of torture and endangerment and kidnapping, and then he went on to become this professor who gave us the holiday of Kwanzaa. But this notion of Pan-Africanism, that Africans on the continent and Africans throughout the diaspora, that we all have mutual interests. And mind you, these are Western academics who are imposing their made up fantasy idea of what they think Africa is, right? The red, the black, and the green. But Africa as a continent, and this is why they call it the African nation, right? I mean, and that's the way they see it, right? They see it almost as a nation. I got some pulled up on my computer here because I was reading the mission statement of the African People's Socialist Party, and this is how they view Africa, right? As a nation in and of itself, right? And so this is something that is imposed upon them. But we all know that Africa is it is the most, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, is the most culturally diverse place on the face of the earth. And those people like being different, based upon whatever it is that they choose and whatever, concepts that they choose to, sort of galvanize themselves around. Well, that's their choice. But just to cut to the chase, Neil, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think Marlon said it earlier. You know, I was born and raised in Michigan. I see Marlon has a slight accent. I don't know his background, but then you got, you know, Louisiana, you got blacks in Florida, blacks here, blacks there. I mean, it's ridiculous. And even if human beings, no matter what, once again, race is not the highest virtue or should not be the ultimate form of or the ultimate line of demarcation that we look at when we start separating groups. Because even if you cobble a bunch of black people together, there's still going to be a hierarchy amongst those amongst that group of black people, because they're still different.
Exactly.
Some are going to be smarter than others. Some are going to be stronger than others. Some are going to be more athletic. Some of them are going to be more physically attractive, etc., etc. We see it in the motherland. We've seen it throughout history, and we've seen it, of course, during the freedom movements in the mid 20th century, when we've seen what happened when these various African dictators like Idi Amin Dada and Robert Mugabe and Charles Taylor and Jean Bodel Bokassa and all these men came to power. What they did to their own people. So
own people, yeah,
absolutely not.
All right. Okay. Martin, you got the question, or you want me to repeat it?
I hope they continue. I hope they continue. Because
oh damn.
I hope they continue. I want them to keep doing this to themselves. I'll tell you why I want them to keep doing this to themselves. It'll give them exactly what they want. A complete and everlasting, unending cycle of depression.
Yeah.
And for me, I have long since stopped feeling bad about that mindset. I used to be like, you know what? You should probably feel for them. I don't anymore. And the reason I don't feel for them anymore is because they have seen socialism not work and kill people, and they don't care. They have seen it proven in front of them that what they talk about is absolute nonsense, and they don't care. They have seen that whatever they try to push can be rebutted in 5 seconds in not just a personal story, but a macro story across the United States, and they don't care.
Exactly.
So no, I don't want them to break free of their mind. I don't want them to come out. I want them to stay there. I hope they rot there. I hope, for all intents and purposes, that they get exactly what they're looking for. And you know what they're looking for? Freedom from themselves. They don't even like themselves. They have zero respect for what they even have, and they still want more just to be more depressed. And I hope they get exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you got to let people run all the way to the bottom of the barrel, to the bottom of the canyon, smack their head in the walls a couple of times, and don't give them rubber padding, for them to stop and realize, I'm doing this to myself, and I got to stop. Words ain't gonna help them no more. Well wishes ain't gonna help them no more. And I speak from personal experience that sometimes you have to get to the point where you realize there's no way for me to keep doing what I'm doing and survive.
Yeah.
I got to the point where the bottom, I got to the absolute lowest of the low, and there was nothing left for me to go down to. And when I finally got there, I realized I was the one that put me there. But people on the way down, people kept telling me, bro, you're going down. No, you don't know what you're talking about. You're going down. Shut up. I know what I'm doing. So no matter how many people told me, I never listened. So I hope this for every pro-black activist, every original black activist, every Pan-African, every pro-blackity black person out there. I hope you find what you're looking for. Yeah. I hope you find every bit of despair that you think is out there, and you encounter it in full.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of it, I hope you encounter. Why? Because you can't break free of something until you finally understand that it don't exist.
Right.
And the only way for you to realize it don't exist is to bust your head wide open. Yeah, bust your head to the white meat. And I hope you do that. Keep going. Keep going.
It reminds me
fools in America.
I'm not going to get biblical on y'all, but it reminds me of Romans chapter 1 when it speaks about God giving man over to his reprobate mind.
Mm-hmm.
You continue, you keep on disobeying. Okay, I'm gonna give you, just like Marlon said, I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give it to you. If you want it, I'm gonna give it to you. And you're gonna realize, right? So you better scale it back, you better pull back before it's too late, or else I'm gonna leave you to your own devices, and you're gonna find out the hard way, man. You really are.
They're about there.
Yeah.
They're real close.
Wow. All right. Wow. That was great. This is great, guys. This was fantastic. I think we covered a lot of ground, a lot of insight, guys. I hope everyone in the audience, I hope you guys gained some value from tonight's discussion. Want to thank you guys, both of you guys, for taking the time out to come on. I really appreciate it. Any last final thoughts before we shut this down?
I guess I'll go.
I'm sorry, real quick. Chuck, let the folks know where to find you, man.
By the way, Chuck, I put your link in the chat before. I'm going to put it again here.
All right, thanks, man. Just teach him Chuck on Instagram. You know, teach how you spell teach _ EM. You know, little ebony phonics. Chuck, you'll find me on Instagram, and same on YouTube. Just started up a YouTube channel recently. Only got about a dozen or so videos up there because I really just started putting myself out there like that. I've been kind of in the cut for a little while, but I'm trying to get out there and so add my voice to all the chatter and see if there's a market for what I have to say. And so yeah, that's where you can find me. I just got 2 social media accounts as of right now, just Instagram and YouTube. That's it. And final thoughts. Yeah, I watched you guys before, man. Marlon, I didn't know you were so funny. I thought Corey was the funny one because he had me cracking. Hey, you funny too, but maybe you the funny one, man. But yeah,
looks aren't everything, man. Funny looks aren't everything, you know. I look funny.
Yeah, but I have fun with you guys, man. I hope to come back. I'm
absolutely, man.
I'm speaking to you guys. I also have the YouTube live on my phone right next to me. And I just quickly wanted to just acknowledge something that Barbara said in the chat. She said, we all need to come together. Doesn't matter what race, color, or creed. Again, I will not see that in my lifetime. I understand what Barbara means, and I know she's saying that in good faith, and I know she means well. But that's not biblical. There will be no. I mean, yeah, as far as and I know everyone may not be Christian, right? I get it, right? But let me just try to explain this in the most basic way that I possibly can, right? Because when you start talking about division, and I say this quite often, division does not necessarily mean chaos, because what division also connotes are choices. And that's why God, in fact, allows you to have free will so that you can experience the joy of true love. Because without free will, you will never know what it is like to engage in a moral act. Because to have unity is not, or to have unity is not harmony, but unity is in fact conformity. And so you'll never see that. You'll never see everyone come together. Not, that's sort of like, that's utopian, right? And remember what Marx said at the beginning of the Communist Manifesto, that the history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggle. And that's why the left is constantly looking to the margin in order to bring it to the center so that they can find a new margin in order to continue in the Hegelian march toward the end of history, which of course Karl Marx referred to as communism, when we would in fact have heaven on earth, everyone coming together and getting along. And everyone will never come together and get along. That's just not possible. It'll never happen, Barbara. I'm sorry. But don't fret, because
don't fret, Barbara.
There is
Barbara fret. No,
there is solace, there is salvation, but it's not that way. So
sorry to bust your bubble.
That's my final thought.
Marlon, any final thoughts?
Man, I don't got no thoughts, bro.
Appreciate it.
Final thoughts. The division that they're trying to cause is going to prevail if we give them the time of day. And I think the time for peace is a fallacy under this pretense. I am not ever more going to be nice to these people. Hear me out. Okay, you're gonna say that's not very Christ-like.
No.
I am in the table flipping mode right now. Okay,
I'm with you, bro.
and when it
Money
comes to
changes.
when it comes to table flipping, I'm also carrying with me a whip, and so
Cat of nine tails.
if they don't like it, that's okay. They don't have to. I don't have to like that. They don't like it. That's okay. But what I will not do is kowtow anymore because they bank on that and they thrive on that. This apology tour that everyone likes to go on, you'll never find me on that. In fact, I hope they call me to apologize so I can double, triple, and quadruple down and louder. And I ask everyone out there to do the same. If you're not unapologetically for God, get out of the way of those of us who are.
Right. The truth is divisive. The truth is divisive by
Period.
nature.
Period. So I'm my last words are this to people out there. Whenever you encounter this kind of mindset, this oppressive, which is really what it is, oppressive, degrading type of mindset, the easiest way for you to combat it is to be the complete and utter opposite and not care a thing about their feelings. Because if you spare their feelings, you're in essence enabling their behavior. And I don't do that with my 4-year-old, and I sure as hell am not going to do it with an adult. So if you think that I'm going to treat you like an adult, then be prepared because I treat my 7-year-old way worse. I just want people to understand that.
Oh my goodness. All right. Words for the wise. Right. Guys, I just want to end. I'm just going to end it with a quote here from Nietzsche. I wanted to share it, but screw it. I'll just read it here. So, ye preachers of equality, the tyrant frenzy of impotence crieth thus in you for equality. Your most secret tyrant longings disguise themselves thus in virtue words. All right.
That's deep.
Yeah, it's deep.
Yes, sir.
It's Nietzsche. I know. Well, guys, I appreciate you. Yeah, man. I'm telling you, man. Marlon, Chuck, hang out in the back chat for a second. But guys, we're gonna end the show here. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Like the video, share the video out. Please share it out. Let's get this content circulating. We definitely gotta get this truth out there. I appreciate you guys. I'm a little bit more sanguine than Mr. Marlon over here. Forgive me. I got a cousin. Anyway, so I'm gonna end it like how I always end it here, guys. We speaking truth and reality, and I promise you, we will reinstitute morality. Y'all have a good night.